Hi, my name is Mylin Calvin with Bento System Software. There is a new Families First Coronavirus Response Act that becomes effective on April 1st, providing emergency paid leave with refundable tax credits to help employers pay for it. Today, I am talking with HR consultant Rusty Faulks. He's the founding principal with Windwood Partners, who can help make sense of all these new requirements for business owners as part of this new Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So to start, what is this act and what is it addressing?
Thanks, Mylin. So this act, the paid leave that's being provided, is really divided into two parts, and there's 6 qualifying reasons. To try to boil it down to its essence, your regular full-time employees, well, it provides paid sick leave. Let me just start there. It provides paid sick leave or paid sick time, as is also described, up to 80 hours for your full-time employees at their regular rate of pay. And so that just is kind of in the simplest form. In addition, and so the paid sick time, then you break it down into how much do you have to pay. If it's for the employee's illness, or the employee is being required to be quarantined by a government entity, or the employee is the one who's their doctor has ordered them that they need to stay at home, then that's paid at 100%, up to a cap of $511 a day, or an aggregate of $5,110. The paid sick time is for up to 80 hours, as I said. The second pay group would be if the pay is for caring for an individual who has been diagnosed, or for the same reasons as you as an employee would be out, or if a school is closed, or if someone has what the Health and Human Services has described as a similar condition, and they still haven't clarified what all that means. If you're out for those reasons to care for someone else, essentially, or you have a similar reason that's been identified by Health and Human Services, the pay is at 2/3 your regular rate of pay, or if you're at minimum wage, 2/3 of minimum wage. So that's sort of the very essence of the paid sick time. Then you go to the second part, and that is the expanded family medical leave. So currently, for employers that have more than 50 employees, they have to participate in the Family Medical Leave Act. This is an expansion of that act. For anyone who has less than 50 employees, this will be completely new. Let me back up and say eligibility for the paid sick time is if someone's employed, they're immediately eligible. There's no waiting time. For the Expanded Family Medical Leave Act, there is a 30-day eligibility period. So you have to have been employed for at least 30 days before you qualify for this. The expansion on the Family Medical Leave Act, all that does is cover in the event that school is closed, or a child care facility is closed, or a child care provider is not available. Then, per the Family Medical Leave Act, for those that are familiar with that, you get up to 12 weeks of unpaid job protected leave. But in this case, you have up to 12 weeks of paid leave at the 2/3 the regular rate of pay, or 2/3 of minimum wage, whichever that is. So that's just sort of in essence. Now there's a lot of nuances to this, but that's basically what it is. Now, let me just mention one other thing. There's 6 qualifying reasons, and I've already alluded to those. The Act and all of the information on this will refer to reason number 1, reason number 2, reason number 3. It'll refer to the numbers. So it's important, and it'd be helpful, I think, just to be familiar with those numbers. Reasons 1 through 3 relate directly to the individual employee and things that they are having to stay home that are COVID related. So everything is COVID related. For reasons 4, that's if you're there staying home to care for an individual employee. For reason 5, that's if you're staying home because a school or childcare is closed. And reason 6 is that similarly situated situation. So I think that's about as small of a boil down as I can do on summarizing what's involved.
Right. And this is very complex. So we'll provide some information later to where you could get in touch with Rusty later on to answer any specific questions. A lot of people are experiencing one of these 6 things. So which businesses does this affect?
So again, this is affecting any employer with less than 500 employees. So it's for profit, private, nonprofit, any of those 3, but it's private employers with less than 500 employees. It also affects public employers, period. And there are some nuances on public employers, but I'm not going to go into the details on that. And if an employer has less than 50, there is a possibility of an exemption on the family medical leave portion, but it has basically the leave has to jeopardize the viability of that business in order for that exemption to come into play. And there's still guidance coming out from the DOL on that. Does
Okay,
that answer the question you're
it
asking?
does.
Okay.
Yes. And then we're told that this becomes effective on April 1st. Is that still accurate?
That is correct. And so interesting thing with it being becoming effective on April 1st. So let's say someone has been out on COVID for COVID reasons at the end of March. And let's say you as an employer you're trying to be generous with your employees. And so you gave them time off. Even if you maybe knew this was coming up, you can't claim any tax credit on that. Whatever you've done is done. That employee still gets the full 80 hours from April 1st forward. So you can't take off for anything that's already been given, and the employer cannot claim any tax credits on any time taken prior to April 1.
Okay, that's good information. So let's go into the how. How do people, business owners, become compliant with this new Families First Coronavirus Response Act?
So there's really several things that you need to do. One, there's a posting that's required. That's on the website, dol.gov. There is a required posting. I'm sure employers everywhere have either seen it or they're going to be getting more information on that. It's got to be posted in conspicuous places throughout a facility. Second thing, they're really, to me, well, not only to me, but if I just spoke to a prominent labor attorney here in Nashville this week, and I think everyone's pretty much in agreement. You don't need to go out and create a new policy for this. What the Department of Labor has put together is sufficient. They have one of their sheets is called the Family First Coronavirus Response Act Employer Rights. And if you go to that employer, and then there's, employee rights, and there's also one of employer requirements. For you as the employer, if you use the employer requirements page, it's a good starting place just for what you need to do. But the employee rights is the page that really I would say you use for a policy. That's your policy in general. What you got to then make sure is that you're applying it into your specific situation. And so we keep finding more and more questions coming up in different situations. And there's your policy. The third thing is you need to make sure that you're operating in good faith, because right now there's going to be a 30-day non-compliance period that the DOL has offered to employers. As long as they see that employers are looking to operate with reasonableness and in good faith, then they're not going to be looking to nail anybody. Remember, the whole intent of this and the whole spirit of this policy is to, one, try to reduce the risk of people contracting and being exposed to the virus, and it's to show care and compassion for your employees. And it's also to provide some relief to employers who are paying for this additional time off. So anyway, you just need to make sure you're just moving forward. If anyone comes forward with a COVID-related reason, then you just need to have in your mind, okay, there's a leave law that I need to make sure I'm being compliant with. Uh, the last thing I guess that I would say is you need to make sure as an employer that you are uh, collecting your documentation. It's going to be a little different than normal because sometimes doctors aren't even available. Teledocs may be a good way. It's going to be emails. It's going to be, how do we know your child was out from school? You're going to have to pull something, take a picture that shows their school was closed off the website. There's a lot of things in that we could talk about and get into more detail. But the bottom line is, in order to make sure you get that reimbursement and that tax credit, there's not going to be any issues. You just need to have your documentation. And in fact, the Department of Labor has said that employers must require employees to provide the documentation. So I'm supposing there could be audits down the road. It's going to be important that employers keep up with documentation for employees that do have COVID-related absences.
Sure. So the economic impact on business owners has been happening for a while now, and many have already decided or chosen that they need to put employees on furlough. How does that affect an employer or an employee related to this?
Unfortunately, the Department of Labor has made clear that there will not be any requirement for an employer to pay. The employee is not eligible for the emergency paid leave if they're laid off, if they're on furlough. And so whether the employer pays something or not, well, I mean, if they're on furlough, they're not going to do that anyway. But the employer certainly could not collect any tax reimbursement while someone's on furlough. I can tell you that because the DOL has made it pretty clear that it's just not covered. Now, I will say this: if someone is taking their COVID leave and you're paying, they're being paid for that, and you're going to get your reimbursement as an employer. If you all of a sudden decide to furlough them or lay them off in the middle of their COVID leave, I would just suggest that's probably not a good idea because there are some prohibitions. I mean, it's just the whole reasonableness and common sense. So,
Sure. So there's probably some situations where an employee has already been out for family medical leave. How would this affect those types of people?
So, and I think I kind of alluded to that a while ago. So if someone's already been out. Well, actually, I didn't allude to that because I was telling you about in the situations where someone has taken some leave. But if someone has family medical leave, let's say they were out back in October for pregnancy and they took 6 weeks of leave. Well, the Family Medical Leave Act, this is an expansion of the Family Medical Leave Act to provide for care if someone is school is closed or childcare is closed. But it doesn't change the Family Medical Leave Act. It doesn't change the fact that an employee only has 12 weeks of leave in the course of a 12-month period. So if they've already taken some leave, that would be reduced. So if they've had 6 weeks, they would only have 6 weeks. That would be where an employer would be required to pay that. So Family Medical Leave Act is you just stay compliant with tracking the way you always have with the time that's been taken. And employees don't get an extra 12 weeks. They just get the normal 12 weeks. So it says up to 12 weeks for that family medical leave portion.
Okay.
By the way, just one point, because again, this is to show that there's a lot of nuances on this. The family medical leave portion itself, actually the first 2 weeks are unpaid, and then the remaining 10 weeks are paid at 2/3 the regular rate of pay. That does combine with the paid sick leave, which will also pay for the first up to 80 hours, the first 2 weeks, for if a school is closed. But if you've already taken that first 80 hours because you had COVID or you were exposed or you were in isolation or you were caring for someone in that situation, and then you turn around and your child's school closes, you would you wouldn't be able to use that 80 hours again. So again, I'm just kind of telling you there's nuances on a lot of this.
Sure. Um, and this is a fluid situation. It seems like it's always changing, and there's a lot of different scenarios that can happen or are happening. So I think a good question that if we could get an answer from you would be, can an employee take intermittent leave to care for a child at home?
So that's an interesting question. Um, when it talks about if an employee is unable to work and they can get the leave, it also says if you're unable to work or unable to telework. So one of the things that the Department of Labor is really encouraging, and I just think this is so non-governmental, but they are really encouraging collaboration. They're really encouraging that employees and employers be talking with each other, just work this out. And so if you have an employee who needs to stay home with their children, and let's say the employee wants to work their 8 hours in the evening, that's perfectly fine. If the two of you work that out. If you say, listen, I can only give 3 hours in the evening because I'm having to take care of my kids. I'm using that as the example. Or let's say someone has COVID and they're not showing, drastic symptoms, and they're able to work most of the day. They put in 6 hours a day. As long as you're teleworking, you can work intermittently. And that's encouraged. It's encouraged for the employee to work it out and to do your work intermittently if you're doing telework. If you're working from the office, let's say someone's in a manufacturing job or they're in a job where they actually have to come to a work site, then intermittent leave is not permitted because obviously the intent of this is to prevent spreading COVID. So if you've been exposed or you've got it, no, you can't come to work, for part of the day. It has to be taken in full day increments, is what the Department of Labor says.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. As you mentioned, there's a lot of nuances to this act. So below this video, we'll provide some contact information for Rusty so that if you, as a business owner, have questions, you can consult with Rusty and he can answer your questions, and you guys can take it further from there. So thank you, Rusty. I appreciate your time today. And our goal at Bento is to provide valuable information to the business owners that we work with or could work with, so that you're getting all the information during this time that you need as a business owner, because we know it's challenging, and the more that we can be a helpful resource for you, the better. I think that will all come out of it. So thank you, Rusty. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, my man. Really appreciate you letting me be here.